admit to what happened, admit it, accept it, and move forward, we will be in a different place. We wouldn't have all this drama that we have.
I think it was my wife who she posed this question to me. She says, "Why do you think when we bring up to white people or just, people who aren't of color, and we say, oh, it was this happened, and their response is immediately to get defensive?" She says, why is their response to get defensive? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's akin to being wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong, and when you are wrong and you're called out on it, instead of embracing it, a lot of us try to fight it, or we're trying to make excuses. So when you
Or
see
dismissive.
or dismiss it, yeah. So when you see statistics like, yes, more people of color get arrested than, or however many chances more likely to get
Yep.
arrested or a violent
And then they
altercation with
come,
the
well,
cops.
white people, this white on white crime. Yeah,
Yeah,
but nobody's ever coined that. Nobody's ever
no,
said that.
no, exactly.
Nobody's ever said Asian on Asian crime. I was actually looking at some other information too that I found. It's a very low percentage of Asian people that are incarcerated, extremely low. And because it was saying something about how when they first immigrated here and how they were treated poorly, then they were also given the opportunity to go to school and get educated and, be business owners. So they turned that around for themselves as a culture. Well, so how come that can't happen for us?
And why is it whenever we try to do something like that, it's always met with opposition?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
It,
because they don't want to see us win. And you know what I always tell a lot of my non-black friends when they say, "Well, Laura, you're the friend of everybody and you get along with people." And I said, "Yeah, because I respect others." I said, "But I'm pro-black. That doesn't mean I'm anti-white. I respect you too in your lane, but I'm always going to support me first. Number one, that's who I'm rooting for."
when we talk about Black history, what's some of the biggest things that people miss that they should know that's not common knowledge?
I think that people should actually dig deeper in Black history and not always pull up Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. There are a lot of scientists, a lot of athletes, a lot of inventors that have paved the way for us. And so on my personal Facebook page, I post every single day, probably 3 times a day, about a different, unknown Black history fact or something about a person or inventor. So people, and because I have a lot of white and Hispanic and Asian friends, and I want them to be educated. So I have a teacher friend who she used to teach here with me in Vegas, and she moved to Utah. She's white, she's Mormon, but we're really close. I taught her daughter. And so she was like, "I can't wait until Black History Month, Lori, because I learned something every single year from you." So I think it's important for us to dig deeper and look below the surface. And a lot of things, a lot of my white friends were posting when the unrest was going on. Well, Martin Luther King, this is not what he would have wanted, and I had to correct them. I'm like, he was hated when he was alive. That's why he was killed.
Mm.
Yeah, nonviolence, but he still would have got with somebody. So don't look at him as a martyr now because he's dead. Because when he was alive, people wanted him dead. And yesterday, I posted a video about Ruby Bridges, about her situation with going to school, a sixth grader, first grade, and she had adult white men and women. We don't want our kids going to school with her. We're going to kill her. They threatened to kill her and her mom. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine if that happened today?
Hmm.
And I think when kids learn about Ruby Bridges in school, it's whitewashed. They don't tell the real deal what was going on. They
Hmm.
don't.
And you don't hear a lot about Emmett Till.
No.
And you know how there's thousands of Emmett Tills out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it sure is. And I just saw a meme just before we got on this call. It said that if Bill Cosby was convicted of all these crimes from, the date rape, his case from years ago, And I get whatever the lady, whatever, I don't even know her name, but whatever, because I don't even want to speak her name, but the lady who accused him, why is she still alive? How come she can't be brought up on charges? Because she admitted in 2017 that it was made up.
Yeah.
But it's double standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's at the bottom. The bottom of it is double standard here. That's what we deal with.
Yeah, it's funny that you say it's whitewashed. Well, it's not funny, but you say it's whitewashed. And my wife's cousin, he's 12. He was writing a paper on Dr. King, and she asked my opinion, and I was like, "Oh, did you mention that he was assassinated by?" And she's like, "Stop!" And I'm like, "No, that should be in the
No.
books. That should be something he should know." And I
Mm-hmm.
want that. I want those conversations to happen in those classrooms because,
Yes.
like you said, this whitewash of history is not the same. I mean, the same goes with just us going to war in countries that we don't belong
We
don't
have no
belong in,
business.
have no
We have no
business.
business there.
You know, and
None.
it's we got people who join. I was in the Marine Corps, but we got people who were in the military, and we got two generations fighting in the same war. That's ridiculous. What are we doing
It's
here?
crazy.
You know,
And I'm sure that the soldiers are like, why are we here?
some of them.
Some of them, yeah. Why are we here? But just to circle back to the education of it, so you do have some teachers who will seek out and get other information and inject. And then you also have teachers who are uncomfortable because they don't know and they don't want to say the wrong thing. And I've had this discussion with some of my colleagues because our school is a K through 12 school. And I'm real cool with this middle school, 7th and 8th grade history teacher. She's so dynamic. I mean, this lady, she actually travels to a lot of places that she teaches, and she brings that back to the classroom, which is really cool. And we've talked about it. She's a white girl, and she said, "You know what, Lori, I do think that these things are important, and I want to teach these." She said, "But I'm just afraid to say the wrong thing, or I don't know." And this is something that is intrinsic to me because I am a woman of color. But if you have a white teacher who might want to inject some things, it is a little scary for them because they don't know the right or the wrong thing to say. But I will say that since I've been a teacher, I'm more aware of other teachers, and I read a lot of things. And what I will say, the downside of Black History Month, when teachers like that try to inject, and it's the wrong message, because I just read this yesterday about the Wisconsin teachers that all were suspended from work because they had some assignment that they sent out to sixth graders that said, what would you do if a slave went against you? What kind of punishment would you do? What kind of assignment is that, and why would you even assign that? So that is one case. Another case that I read it was 2 years ago, where a teacher in Georgia had a noose hanging up in her classroom. That was her representation of Black History Month. What are you doing? What are you doing? Then was another teacher in Virginia. I think this was 2 years ago as well. They took the students to a cotton field and had them picking cotton.
I heard about that one.
What are you doing? Like, oh my gosh.
So what lesson is that other than like this is how bad it was? Like I don't.
That's when you're just perpetuating. And Black history is to celebrate Black people that contributed to this country. It's not to go back and revisit slavery
Yeah,
or revisit, though. That's not what it's about. And I wish people knew that part. I think that it's a whole education that needs to happen with that, with teachers.
yeah,
And
and
I can't even say they're coming from a good place because you're pulling the negative. I
yeah.
can't even give you credit for that.
There's a lot of positive innovators in Black history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Black history is American history. You got the
Yes.
Tuskegee Airmen. You
Mm-hmm.
got there. I mean, there's so many. There's so many parts of American history that have come from just Black innovators that don't get highlighted enough, and
Right.
it's just
Yes, and it was another case here actually in Las Vegas. It was a kinder or first grade. This was like a couple of years ago too. The mother was on the radio. So the teacher it was recess. This was the game. Catch a slave. What? It's like, oh, catch a slave. I was thinking, now see, this is why people end up on the news.
Yeah, it's
Because you're
2021.
going crazy on them.
It's 2021. Why are we still having these, like, you don't got to be a genius to understand those social cues like that. That's not okay.
No, and but that's the thing, that people don't feel that that's offensive. Like, where's your logic? There's no logic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. So I definitely try to be that champion and try to highlight the positive. But I did post the other day. Are you familiar with Seneca Village?
It sounds familiar.
So Seneca Village actually is where a lot of Black landowners lived in Central Park that we know it as today. So when people started migrating to the United States, specifically in New York, because New York is an island, so
Mm-hmm.
down at the south point of the island, like downtown Manhattan, was a lot of people that lived there. Everybody was slums because people were working in the factories. It was the industrial period, so Blacks really were trying to kind of get their own space, so they started moving a little bit further north from Manhattan. They moved up to where Central Park is located, and they created there was one guy, he bought three pieces of land, and then so obviously word of mouth, they're like, oh well, he's buying, you know what, let's go up there and see what we can do. So they started buying land and started developing. They had their own stores, they had everything, was their own setup. Okay, they didn't bother anybody, they just was up there doing their own thing. So sure enough, the white folks, the upper echelon, started traveling, would be going to Europe. And so in Europe, they would have these huge parks, like in the middle of wherever. And they were like, oh, we should bring this to America. We want to have the same, setup. So they decided to start to create Central Park. And so Seneca Village, all those people got booted out. Their land was taken from them. And they pretty much got evicted. They destroyed, it was like 300 families that lived up there, and they lost all of that land. That's what we know as Central Park today.
Wow.
Yep. So, and that's the thing, but that's not in a history book. And I
No.
tell my students that every year. I always talk about it. I'm like, who's been to New York? And then, oh yeah, who's been to Central Park? Well, did you know that was owned by Black people?
Yeah.
I tell them every time.
Same thing as Black Wall Street.
Yep. And they don't talk about that either
No.
in school at all. So when the whole, everything was going crazy with George Floyd in Minnesota, and they're like, they're tearing up this. Well, what was it okay for people to bomb and kill all these people in Oklahoma when they were self-sufficient, not bothering anybody? They have their own banks, their own lawyers, their own businesses, and you just kind of went through, and I mean, they were dropping bombs on them.
Oh, I
This is
know.
in the early 1900s.
I was in like I said, I'm from Philly, and they bombed 4 blocks or a whole
Oh yeah.
four set of blocks just
That
to
was,
get.
when was that? In the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
94?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I remember that.
Nobody
And I,
even
and I
talks about that,
remember.
and they don't even talk about that.
I know. I was 24 years old, shocked, looking at the TV like, are they really bombing these houses where people live? What is going on?
Children, families, just to get people that they consider terrorists.
Yep, I remember that. That was terrible. I can't even imagine. But it does happen. But like you said, it's not in the history books, and people don't know.
Yeah.
So they need to rewrite them, I think.
And this podcast is all about positivity, but I always say you can't focus on the positive and ignore the negative. So a lot of the things I like to do is highlight these types of problems. Problems like whitewashing history, problems like not exposing our youth and the people to the atrocities that is America, America has made. Like, you can be proud to be an American, but you can also accept the history, the dark history that we have. And a lot of that is also how we can solve those problems. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and you have your own business.
Yep. Yep, we started family business, Panther Solutions. We started Panther Solutions last summer.